Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Friday, April 26, 2019. On today's episode, we're going to talk about Avengers Endgame, and specifically where this leaves off all the characters for the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So there's going to be a lot of speculation, but this is going to be a spoiler episode, so if you have not seen the movie, turn off this podcast and listen to it after you have seen the movie. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta. And joining me at this podcast is Slash Film Managing Editor Jacob Hall.
Hello, hello.
And Senior Writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
So I'm glad we were able to get together today because I know Ben is about to go on an international trip, and we wanted to get you on to talk about Endgame. I guess, very briefly, tell me how much you love this movie.
I love this movie a lot. Jacob, do you love this movie?
I had a vivid emotional reaction matched only by Game of Thrones and the Harry Potter books.
Wow.
Yeah, I think I cried the second time I saw it. I was taking notes, and I actually took notes of. I was trying to track back how many times I cried during my first viewing of this movie. I think it was 6 times that I cried.
Peter, I have to admit that when I first saw your reaction, that you cried multiple times, I sort of internally rolled my eyes a little bit.
People on Twitter were making fun of me hardcore, and then
I didn't feel the need to make fun of you to your face. I just thought about it, and I was like, all right, Peter's a bigger Marvel fanboy than I am, so there's no way that I'm going to cry that many times in this movie. And I lost count of how many times. It was probably around the same as you, though. And so I was like, son of a bitch, this movie got me. All of the emotional moments worked so well. I'm so shocked that this movie was so satisfying.
And I think one of the most surprising things about the emotional nature of this film is, sure, there's moments where, someone dies and you're sad about that, or there's emotional reunions that you're happy about that. But I think this might be the first time ever in a movie for me, and I got to really think about this. I'm not sure if this is true, but as far as I can think of, that there was a moment so epic and so grand that I literally started crying. Do you know what I mean? When he says Avengers assemble and all the portals open, I was just crying out of happiness of just how amazing this moment is. So
yeah, that moment got I didn't cry at that moment, but there was a grown man next to me who was fist pumping the entire movie. But when that moment happened, I could hear him sobbing out loud. And there was a little kid in front of me who was like his mom couldn't trying to shush him, but he kept screaming yeah, so it was just this amazing reactions all around me. And I guess the biggest spoiler alert: the final shot of Steve Rogers and Peggy Carter dancing in their home in the past. My wife made sure we didn't stand up from our seats until she had dried her tears so no one else could see her crying. It was just there was a lot of emotions in that theater.
And the thing is, go ahead.
What's amazing about this movie is that even though the MCU has had ups and downs, good movies and bad movies, this one makes the entire experience, makes 11 years worth of movies, all the lows and the highs, all feel worth it. Even Thor: The Dark World feels worth it now.
It does. I actually want to go back and revisit that movie after seeing, which is kind of crazy. Let's jump into this. Let's get into our topic, because we're probably going to have a bunch of spoiler discussions of Avengers Endgame. But today I wanted to gather to talk about the characters of this movie, talk about where this leaves them, but maybe even as a backdoor way of us talking about the arcs as a whole. And I think we have to start that discussion with the man himself, Tony Stark, who started it all with Iron Man, and meets his ultimate fate here, right?
Yeah, and one thing I want to point out about this is Slash Film contributor Siddhant Adlaka has been doing this amazing series for us called Road to Endgame, where he's been analyzing all films in the series in very in-depth ways, reading up on religion and military funding and all this stuff. One thing he pointed out that really blew my mind wide open is that when people compare Tony Stark to Stephen Strange, Doctor Strange, they always say, they're both arrogant, smart guys who are really good at what they do. But what he pointed out to me, and I think this is completes Tony's arc, is that Doctor Strange is a learner. He learns things, he incorporates it into his life, and then he is always feeding himself more knowledge, and he's arrogant, but a part of a quest for knowledge, whereas Tony Stark is the smartest man in the world, and his arrogance is about his self-confidence, what he can already do. So whereas Doctor Strange's journey is a process of learning, Tony's journey has been a process of making mistakes and trying to fix those mistakes and making more mistakes. So Tony's arc, is from a guy who makes a big mistake of selling weapons, then making Ultron, and then starting the Civil War. And he's always trying to do the right thing, but his inability to learn and his inability to sacrifice and look at himself in perspective is entirely about, it leads to him failing constantly. So the final moment where Doctor Strange, who's like him, his mirror opposite, makes it clear to him, you need to die in order to save the universe. Tony Stark finally learns what Doctor Strange has always known, even though they seem so similar.
That is a good reading. And we should talk about, Iron Man in the original Avengers. He saw, what was out there in space. He saw, this alien invasion on Earth that gave him some PTSD and led to him creating Ultron, or what happened with Ultron. And Tony talks about that in this movie. His visions. He had these visions of what was coming with Thanos, and he wanted... he did it the wrong way, as you said, but his idea was to create this security system around Earth that would protect them from any dangers from afar. I think probably, for me, one of the most interesting moments in this film with Tony is him... Well, he comes face to face with Howard Stark, his father, and in that moment, I think he realizes that he's been trying to be like his father and he doesn't want to be. Is that a good reading of it?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of that and him realizing that his father, this titanic figure in his life, who he's always tried to live up to and he always imagined is sneering down at him, was just another guy with a job with the same fears he has. And that, it's a combination of both those things, of realizing that his father was as fundamentally flawed as he was, and that he's his father's son for better and worse.
Yeah, that's kind of how I looked at it. Is it humanized Howard in a way that Tony has never seen before, like being on his level like that, talking with him as if he's a colleague instead of, under the shadow of his legacy as he was as a child, in that dynamic, allowed him to see his dad's uncertainties and fears. And I think it gave him the freedom to be a person. It gave Tony the freedom to be a person instead of trying to be a figure himself, trying to live up to his dad's legacy.
For sure. And there's also this movie, this moment in this movie. Obviously, they have given Tony a daughter named Morgan H. Stark, and he has a family life. He's one of the lucky ones, as Pepper Potts says in the movie. And at one point, it just like a couple minutes, he figures out time travel, which is a little bit ridiculous, but whatever. He figures out time travel, and he goes to propose the idea to Pepper Potts, and he's there in that moment hoping that she is going to talk him out of it. And it's such a tragic moment if you see this film multiple times.
Yeah, I agree, and it's, man... seeing Tony with a kid and seeing that he's actually a good father despite his fears, and seeing him happy with Pepper, all the things that he's wanted for his entire life being born out of tragedy. I mean, there's a few movies in this series where it can be argued that Robert Downey Jr. is on autopilot, but there's a reason. But this entire series is successful because people fell in love with this character and the way he portrayed him, and Robert Downey Jr. is aware of that. And in these scenes, he's reminding us that he's not just Iron Man; he's an
yeah. Okay, so Tony dies. But this is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is a comic book property. People have died before and been brought back. What is the chances that we see Tony ever again?
I hope zero, right, Ben?
I think so too. I mean, I think that would be really damaging to this movie's legacy. Like, looking back on it would just undercut the emotional power of this film. And Marvel has had their issues with deaths before, both in the comics and in the movies thus far. But a lot of those have been sort of temporary fake outs. I'm thinking of Samuel L. Jackson in Captain America: The Winter Soldier, for example. But like those movies didn't necessarily. They never brought Coulson back in the movies, and I think that's illustrative of what we're talking about here, right? Because if that happened, that would undercut the power of 2012's The Avengers. And Kevin Feige is smart enough to know not to make that mistake. I think he committed. I think he laid down the. I was about to say lay down the gauntlet. I think he committed to a decision here and decided that this is the end for Tony Stark. And maybe you could do something in a prequel, or of course, like any of the Disney Plus stuff. Anything that takes place before the event here, but I feel like this is like the hard out for Tony's storyline.
See, that's what I was going to suggest. I was going to say that I don't think we're going to see Tony Stark ever being brought back from the dead, but I think we might see holograms of him, like messages he has left. Those like 3D like holograms that we saw like at the end of the movie. I think maybe we could see Robert Downey Jr. His voice as Tony Stark playing like an AI, kind of like Jarvis or something like that. Like I feel like there might be some kind of like role for him there, but without him being alive.
There's a character in modern Marvel comics named Riri Williams, and a couple years ago in the comics, Tony Stark died, and Riri is this genius kid, this black teenager who builds a Iron Man suit in her garage, and she gets access to an AI that's been programmed by Tony Stark's mind. So her Jarvis in her suit is Tony Stark as an AI, and naturally Tony Stark comes back a few years later, as a clone of a younger clone of himself with his memories all intact. Long story, but if they ever want to tell Riri Williams' story, which is sort of Spider-Man-esque, Spider-Man meets Iron Man. It could easily have Robert Downey Jr. being, the holographic AI mentor to her and actually draw that from the comics.
I just hope it never gets as convoluted as the comics. We should talk about, there was someone at Tony's funeral at the end of the movie, which, by the way, I guess was shot during the weekend. They did that Vanity Fair Marvel 10 years photo shoot.
I was thinking that when I was watching it, because I was like, this is the perfect opportunity because everybody is here.
Yeah, no, that was not a camera trickery of any kind as far as I know. All those people were actually there, and they actually shot it, from what I understand, as a funeral and as a wedding. So that was one of those deceptive moves by the Russos to protect the secrets and not spoil Endgame. But there was one person at this funeral that the first time around I was like, who is that kid? So, Ben, who is that kid?
That kid is Ty Simpkins, who is the young boy in Iron Man 3, if you remember. I think his name is Harley in that film. And he's the kid that, like, when Tony crash lands in Tennessee in Iron Man 3, he's like a sort of a young inventor himself. His character's name is Harley Keener, and he sort of helps Tony overcome some of his panic attack moments caused by that PTSD in the Battle of New York. And because of the 5-year time jump and the fact that kid was,
and Iron Man 3 came out when?
In 2013, I think. And yeah, because it was like the first movie right after the original Avengers. So that was, 6 years ago, and you've got a 5-year time gap in there. But just the 6-year aging of Ty Simpkins as an actor, I mean, I remembered him as like that kid, and he looked very similar in Jurassic World, which was 2 years later, as like a floppy-haired little kid. But he's grown up so much; he's had such a drastic a growth spurt that he just looked unrecognizable to me. But yeah, that's him.
But it totally makes sense that he would be there. I know when they first announced they were doing a Spider-Man movie in the MCU, I theorized that they should have made him Spider-Man, which could have been interesting. I guess they went the same way, but with like a little bit older, and Tom Holland, who is probably a better actor. But do we expect to, like, could he take on the Iron Man persona, Jacob?
I don't think so. I think they're done with Iron Man for a bit. I mean, I think they reached a point with Iron Man's suit and with technology and what he's capable of being on screen that I think we're all just ready for different types of heroes. Look at the new generation coming of Captain Marvel, Black Panther, Doctor Strange, and their powers are so different than the first generation Avengers. I think we just we were all ready to move on and see different kinds of heroes doing different kinds of things.
Okay, let's talk about Captain America, Steve Rogers, who in this movie doesn't die, but I guess his story comes to an end.
Yeah, he retires. He steps away from superhero life, goes back in time, and gets that last dance we were promised in First Avenger, and everybody cries.
And by the way, I love how everybody was theorizing that he was going to die and Tony was going to live, and it was the complete opposite. But so Steve Rogers in this movie kind of he gets to actually live his life with Peggy Carter. He gets to go back in time and experience that married life, I guess, outside of the superhero world. Like, so what is he doing there, Jacob? Is he just like inside the house and not leaving the house and just like nobody knows he exists and not fighting any crime, even though he knows there's, big things happening outside those walls?
I like to imagine that Captain America spends most of the rest of his life living in domestic bliss, and occasionally every couple of years gets called out of retirement for a big mission, which we'll get to see in various Disney Plus specials. But yeah, I like the idea of after a life of selfless service, Captain America, Steve Rogers, gets to settle down, whereas Tony Stark has to make the ultimate sacrifice and learn his final lesson, whereas Captain America gets rewarded for always doing the right thing. And, nice guys finish last in his case, but he did finish.
Yeah, it's sort of about him and Tony Stark being able to rest. I think Pepper Potts says, as Tony is dying, you can rest now. And for Steve, it's like he's, like you just said, Jacob, he's spent his whole life in service, and he's able to finally, take a break for once as well.
Okay, we have to talk about the future. You mentioned Disney Plus. We know there is a Falcon and Winter Soldier series coming to Disney Plus, and we'll talk about that later. But I'm wondering, is there a role for Steve Rogers in that? Like, I know there were rumors that Disney was trying to sign Chris Evans to a contract to direct episodes of that series. And could he possibly appear as the guy that's like, overseeing the missions of Falcon and Winter Soldier?
That would be close to the comics. I guess maybe a decade ago, Steve Rogers became an old man due to losing his powers, long comic books, of course. And even though he could no longer fight and be in battle, he would be on the shield helicarriers, and he would be strategizing from a distance and calling the shots for the Avengers, even though he wasn't fighting himself. So I can imagine him being like, maybe not in every episode, but maybe the guy who gives the old man who gives Falcon and Winter Soldier their missions, and go on from there. I mean, it would be a good use of Chris Evans. It keeps him in the universe, and I think everybody will be happy to see old man Steve Rogers for a bit.
Should we address the time travel of this movie in this podcast, or is that going to get too
You wrote an
complicated?
entire article about this, Peter, and it goes into great detail, and I think we should save that for its own podcast, because that's a whole other thing.
We will. But I will say here that I think Steve Rogers is the only thing that breaks the time travel of this movie, the time travel logic. But we have also come up with a reason that it doesn't. But look for that on Monday. Okay, let's move on to the Hulk. Bruce Banner. He has had a huge arc over these films. I mean, obviously he started as Ed Norton, and then they swapped the actors as they did with Rhodey, and he has been grappling with with trying not to break out into the Hulk, and now in this film he has accepted the fact, and the two are one as Smart Hulk.
Yeah, I love this. I think back to is the best line from the original The Avengers, which was him turning around and saying, "That's my secret, Captain. I'm always angry." And the idea that it's been leading to this. It's been leading to the fact that if he's always angry, it means the Hulk is always there, and he's never going to be separate from him. So him making peace with both halves of himself and ending this movie, still as a hulked out scientist and being able to make the best of both worlds is a route that this character gives him closure. I don't know if we'll see more Hulk in future movies, or if we'll see much at all, because I don't know what else you can do with him. But seeing Bruce Banner stable and happy, and living a life where he's taking selfies with people who are Hulk fans was really satisfying. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too when I was watching it. I'm not sure dramatically what else there is to do with the Bruce Banner character, because it seems like all of his issues have been resolved. That's the big thing with Hulk, is that that divide, that duality that he's constantly battling with inside. But once you resolve that, once you come to the conclusion that it's better to have both in your life, I'm not sure. I mean, you can't go back from there, right? Because that doesn't make any sense. And then you can't really necessarily send him off to do Ragnarok level adventures, at least in the same way. Maybe he could team up with the Guardians or something and show up in future movies as like an assist kind of thing. But for him to have any sort of impactful solo presence in any of these movies, I just don't see it anymore, because I feel like all the dramatic narrative storytelling ground has been mined for him.
I mean, not to jump forward too much, but like there are certain major characters in this movie whose arcs are deliberately left dangling, where they give them new information, new motivations, and new like stuff to battle. So when the movie ends, oh, we're going to follow the character for sure. But with Bruce Banner, the movie still ends with him having completely resolved everything.
Well, I mean, Tony Stark's death does leave a space open in the Avengers lineup for someone who's smart, who can create the technology that these people need to use. So, I mean, he could always serve the purpose of like, who is that in the James Bond movie that like,
Q.
Q, yeah. I'm sorry, I'm not the biggest Bond person.
No, that's all right. I just imagine that would be Shuri's job from here on out. I think Black Panther is going to be the new Iron Man on the team, personally.
But she's all the way in Wakanda, though. Like, that's like all the way in a different country.
They have planes.
Yeah.
But I guess he could serve sort of like a Beast role from the early X-Men movies, where he just doesn't really leave the lab and doesn't really participate in like the battle stuff, but he's just like cooking up strategies and like scientific solutions to problems in a lab setting, maybe.
Oh, speaking of that, I love that scene when they first travel back to New York and he does this like begrudging smashing of the car.
It's really funny.
And he's so embarrassed of himself as the old Hulk. Yeah, it's great. Okay, let's talk about Thor. Let's move on to Thor. I think in many ways, if you look back at Infinity War, that is two people's movies. It's Thanos and it's Thor's. And if you watch that from the perspective of Thor as the protagonist of that movie, it all comes down to him appearing in Wakanda, that arrival with Stormbreaker, and him losing. And this movie is all about how that has affected him. He has become Fat Thor now, which I think is hilarious. And I'm so glad, by the way, that they didn't just correct that somehow. Like,
yeah, I was worried that too. He like flexed super hard and his fat goes away. I was really worried about that.
Although when he does become the God of Thunder at the end of in the final battle, like it seems less obvious that he's fat. So maybe like.
Yeah, he's like armored up.
Yeah.
Maybe he's got bigger armor or something.
It works for me because it looks like a big bear of a dude instead of a sleek, athletic dude. So it all works for me still.
Yeah. So in this movie, what is his arc?
Oh man, his arc is learning that he has a lot to learn, and learning that he's maybe not ready to take on the leadership roles, and that maybe it's time for him to go out and find what his purpose is, and that's where we leave him. We leave him ready to co-star in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, right, Ben?
Yeah, totally. And I loved that dynamic. Like you're saying, Peter, I think this movie also is so much about Thor's journey. And, from looking back on the Thor that was first introduced in the MCU, you never would have thought that he would have been the type of character to be able to pull something like this off. But I think Ragnarok opened that character up in so many ways, not just the obvious comedy aspect of it, but because it introduced that comedy side of him, it somehow increased the gravitas of all of the dramatic stuff that Chris Hemsworth is also really good at delivering. And it just it reshaped that character in such a drastic way that all of this works and just makes a lot of sense now.
Yeah, and his characters have all been largely about him trying to take on that responsibility that had been presented on him. And at the end of this movie, he is kind of foregoing that and being like, I want to do what I'm going to do. And actually, that's something I wanted to ask you about, because I think one of the only I do have a couple nitpicks with this movie, and one of them is Valkyrie, the thing that happens at the end with Valkyrie. And we can talk about her in depth in a second. But I'm wondering, like, it kind of feels to me, even though that she has kind of risen to this leadership role in New Asgard, which is kind of the sad fishing town, that he's kind of like, oh, here's my, you are now the king, I don't want it anymore. And it feels kind of like a disservice to Valkyrie, who I always imagine would be one to pick up the hammer.
I get the whole hammer thing. Sidebar: Cap picking up the hammer in the final battle is incredible. But I like this because
we didn't even talk about that.
Yeah, we'll circle back in a second. But the reason I like this, and I get where you're coming from entirely, Peter. The reason I like this is that we get the impression that Valkyrie's actually been running things for the past 5 years. She's been in charge of New Asgard, and Thor has been a figurehead, the guy who gets the title, but as she said, only comes out to get his booze, so go back inside and keep getting drunk and self-pity. So this part of Thor's journey is recognizing, I don't need this title. I can let the title go because somebody better than me has taken it. And I think him acknowledging that is a huge step forward for a guy whose first movie was entirely about how he was ready to be king, even though he was as far from it as possible. Now, him acknowledging that, you know what? I need more time. I'm not ready, so I'll give it to the lady who's much older than me and knows what she's doing is a really in-line character choice for him.
And I love, by the way, that Thor's whole storyline, especially the part when you first sort of meet up with him, when you discover that he's just been drinking and whatever, that whole thing is just such a funny inversion of Aquaman, where you've got this character who is like a huge, essentially a god figure who is like living in this sleepy seaside gorgeous little town and is guzzling beer left and right, but Jason Momoa is just like ripped and rippled, and Chris Hemsworth is just like a blubbering mess playing video games with Korg and Meek all day.
Man, I love how the Russo brothers and the screenwriters, Peter, what are their names? Help me out.
Marcus and McFeely?
McFeely.
Yes, thank you. What they do here with Thor is they managed to take funny Thor from Thor Ragnarok, where he was just so goofy and was really played up Chris Hemsworth's strength, which is to be funny, and managed to, as Ben talked about earlier, merge it with pathos so that he's clearly the same Thor from Thor Ragnarok while still being the same Thor from Thor 1 and 2, while still being this new hybrid character who somehow encompasses it all. And it's a testament to the writing, the directing, and Hemsworth that they managed to finally find the sweet spot of what Hemsworth can do as Thor. And that's why it's so exciting to see him alive and going on a space mission, because I'm really excited to see this Thor going forward.
And I think the Russo brothers and Marcus McFeely need some credit here, because this movie goes on these wildly like tonal shifts from, we're laughing at the comedy of Thor being fat to Thanos being mentioned and it becoming like this emotional sad moment. Like they do that a lot with this character, and I thought it was really well done. One other thing I wanted to mention is on set, on like the sheets and stuff too, they didn't have Chris Hemsworth's name. He was codenamed Lebowski, which is a reference to the Tony's joke in the film. So let's move back to the hammer. Let's talk about what they called on set. Hammer and Shield was the sequence. What do you have to say about this, Jacob? Because like they have been building up to this for some time in the MCU.
Look, I'm an easy mark. I admit it, but this moment made me happier than anything has in a long time. I know they've Cap has wielded the hammer in the comics before, and they hinted at this in Age of Ultron, where he managed to lift the hammer like it's a quarter of an inch. But Cap being worthy.
Why wasn't he worthy then, but he's worthy now?
That's a good question, and the only thing I have to say is that when he was trying to before he was trying to lift it at a party, for selfish reasons, at where everyone's having a good time, here he lifted the hammer in service of the universe to go into a life or death battle, and I think that's why.
I also think like maybe something has to do with like him knowing that information about Tony's father's death, like in not being honest about that might be keeping him from reaching his full potential. And we should also mention that like I think some fans out there that are like that don't read the comics and probably don't watch these films over and over again will think that how is Captain America picking up the hammer and using the superpowers of the God of Lightning? Like, I thought Thor was the only one that was worthy. So can you explain that?
No. It just looks cool, and I'm for it.
I thought it was like that Odin says that anybody that is worthy, like it wasn't just one person. That's what I remember, but...
Yeah, it was something about anybody who's worthy can wield the powers of Thor or something like that, or something. So I guess that's how he's like imbued with the abilities to use the lightning and stuff like that. That's what you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to Valkyrie. Let's talk about Valkyrie because I mentioned her. In this movie, we get to see her riding her Pegasus, which is very cool and like something I didn't expect to see in this movie. What is her arc been? I mean, I guess we kind of went over it. She's kind of adopted the leadership role of this community, and before she was just a warrior.
I mean, her arc is that she gave up the life of servitude to go off and live a life of being a mercenary, and now she's been drawn back in, and she's taken up the old responsibilities. I mean, after being with Thor and saving the Asgardians, she has resumed duties that she lost faith in, 1,000 years ago, I think they say. And so I'm really hoping they get around to making a Thor 4 or the all-female Marvel character movie they've been pitching about for a while, because I would really like to see Queen Valkyrie, her next chapter. I really want to see more of that.
Would that film be called Thor 4, or would it be called Valkyrie, or how would that even work?
That's a good idea. I know that we ran a story because Tessa Thompson, who plays Valkyrie, said in an interview that Taika Waititi, who did Thor Ragnarok, has pitched ideas for Thor 4. So I don't know, especially since Thor is now part of the Guardians of the Galaxy. I feel like in the same way that Hulk was added to Thor Ragnarok, I think we're going to see Valkyrie and Thor kind of bounce around wherever they're needed, and I really hope that they get as juicy roles in other corners of the franchise as Hulk got in Ragnarok.
Okay, let's move on to Black Widow, Natasha Romanoff. She was introduced in Iron Man 2, kind of in a small role, and she was, what is she, like a black ops spy? Is that how you describe her?
Spy, assassin.
Assassin, yeah. And someone that was a loner that didn't really have many relationships or ties. She did have, a working relationship with Clint Barton, who plays Hawkeye. And in this film, because of the snap, actually before the snap, she became part of something bigger. She became part of the Avengers. And because of the snap, she had to elevate herself to a role of leader. We see her in one scene basically controlling everything from Avengers headquarters, having this meeting with the holographic displays with the Avengers who are around not just the world but the universe. Mm-hmm. And she seems to be really upset over what has happened to Barton. So what is the arc of her character in this movie?
I think back to her dialogue in the original Avengers, where she talked about having a lot of red in her ledger that she needs to mark out, meaning she's committed a number of atrocities that she needs to make a right for. And so I think her seeing Clint, Hawkeye, become the kind of person she used to be, and now that she's like completely moved on from, is damaging in a way because, they were in this together. They were the normal ones. They were the buddies. They were the human beings amongst gods and monsters. And now here they are, him having reverted back to the kind of person that she's escaped from. And I'm reminded of the scene at the end of The Winter Soldier where Black Widow releases all the Hydra documents and a bunch of like top secret government information into the wild to expose the conspiracy. And that begins a new arc of the spy becoming transparent. And her arc concludes here where, one, she dies selflessly to help save the universe. And two, when we first meet her, she's a politician. She is organizing things from afar. She's running the team. She is being transparent, open, and concerned for everyone else as opposed to working in the shadows. So her transformation is about, completely letting go of that old life while Hawkeye slips back into it. Yeah, and we're seeing the sadness there.
Once the plan becomes clear, she takes on that the mission of her and Barton going to Vormir. Is that it?
Like Vormir, I think.
And they are going there to get the Soulstone. So this creates an interesting situation where one of them needs to be sacrificed, because to get the Soul Stone, you obviously need to make a sacrifice of the one you love the most, I guess. And both of them, I guess, Clint, who we can talk about in a second. Actually, let's talk about Clint. Clint, who, lost everything. I asked the Russo brothers before I saw this movie, who is the main character of this film? And I think you can make two arguments here. I think you can make the argument that it could be Iron Man, or actually three arguments. You can make Iron Man, you can make Captain America, or you can make Hawkeye. And I feel like the argument at Hawkeye is that it begins with his point of view, his perspective of the snap. And he goes on quite an emotional journey in this film, from losing everything to, basically changing his entire persona and becoming Ronin. And by the way, how awesome was that fight sequence in Tokyo? That was like one single shot.
Yeah, I'm not always big on the Russo's action sometimes, but that one knocked out of the park. Yeah,
and then obviously all leading up to this moment between Black Widow and Hawkeye, in the Soul Stone. Ben, what do you have to say about this?
So this is, I think, one of my only quibbles with the movie. I really enjoyed most of the film and thought that almost everything was executed really, really well. The Soulstone conundrum was the one thing that I didn't fully buy, because I felt like the movie, like you said, Peter, it opens with Hawkeye, and they spend so much time on the transformation of that character throughout this film, how he's been emotionally impacted from losing his whole family, and you get the sense that he should be the one to go over the edge at the end, or not at the end, but on Vormir or whatever. And for Natasha to do it, I feel like maybe they didn't quite lay the same narrative track there. Like, you do get a couple scenes of her sort of hanging around Avengers HQ and talking about how this has affected her, but it didn't land with me in the same way. And I appreciate the sort of ridiculousness of the two of them like fighting to be the one to do it, and like the almost like the cliffhanger reference of her falling through his hand once they're over the edge of the cliff. Like it visually, it's all well done, but just emotionally, I wasn't fully convinced. It sort of felt like a contractual thing, like, okay, this is a way for us to wipe Scarlett Johansson off the table here, and move on with her character and leave Renner around in case we want to use him for something. But I don't know, that moment just didn't land for me.
But I think this is probably one of the most surprising moments, because everybody knows there's a Black Widow movie in pre-production right now. So what do we think that's going to be? Like, I mean, she dies here, and I think Red Skull basically says that, this is an everlasting decision. But he also says there's a soul for a soul. So there's some point that Steve Rogers is going to have to go to this planet and actually come face to face with Red Skull, which is actually kind of an interesting situation that we'll never see, and give back the stone. And when he gives back the stone, does he get a soul back? How does that work?
I don't know. The movie is not interested in that in any way, but I wish I don't know. It's long enough, I guess. So over 3 hours. I mean, it's already pushing it. I'm not sure if they had time to get into that, but maybe they'll be able to explore that in some other property down the line.
Jacob, is Black Widow dead?
I think Black Widow is dead for good, and I think my pet theory, this is pure speculation, guys, is that the Black Widow movie will be a combination of prequel and sequel, with Scarlett Johansson returning in scenes set before Endgame as Natasha Romanoff, and that they recently cast Florence Pugh will play the next generation of assassin spy Black Widow, who's maybe resolving something that Natasha could not years earlier. That is my pet theory, because based purely on casting and based purely on the fact that Black Widow seems pretty definitively dead.
Here's a question. We have introduced time travel into this universe, which is very dangerous. They make it clear that I think they're on the dock and they're having this conversation of, why can't, I think Thor brings it up of like, let's just go back in time and save her. Why can't they do that now? Like, why can't they, like we've seen past Thanos was brought into our current, or 2023, and killed. So why can't past Black Widow be brought here from another dimension?
Part of me wonders that since the Gamora who was brought to 2023 is not the same Gamora that Peter Quill fell in love with, and that she doesn't have the same memory, she hasn't gotten there yet. Are they even rescuing the same person? I mean, yes, maybe technically, but it's not their Natasha. So that would be my guess. But the movie's also not interested in that, so I have a really hard time coming up with an excuse.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough whenever you introduce these like powers that go beyond the reality of the movie. And actually, speaking of that, let's talk about Captain Marvel really quick, because they really built up that movie, Captain Marvel, on, you're going to want to see this movie because this character is going to be hugely instrumental in the Endgame. And, I think even they released a trailer for Endgame right before Captain Marvel came out. They had her at the end in that moment with Thor where he says, I think I like this one. So in this movie, she is barely in the movie. Like, is this a problem with her being overpowered? I mean, she's barely in the movie, but if you think about it, on top of your head, she accomplishes a lot. She saves Tony Stark, who is on the end of his life. He's minutes away from dying at the beginning. She brings him and Nebula back to Earth. She goes and helps kill Thanos. She leaves. And then at the end, she's responsible for taking down, Thanos' huge Star Destroyer type ship. And also, if she wasn't there, Thanos would have been able to snap. So she does accomplish a lot, but she's barely in this movie. Is that a problem?
I don't think so. This movie, I mean, there's a reason why the snap vanished all the newbies in Infinity War. This movie is a long celebration of the core cast plus Rocket and Nebula. The movie spends a lot of time with the original Avengers for a reason. And yeah, Captain Marvel gets a lot to do in the beginning and the end, and it's a lot of fun to see her kick ass. But I think having her around for the core of the movie would have undermined the fact that we're saying goodbye to the core Avenger team. And the movie knows very well we have another decade ahead of us of Captain Marvel, Black Panther, and Doctor Strange. So it lets them come in when they need to, while making sure the focus is purely on the characters who are saying goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm just worried about her future in this universe. Like, it just seems so overpowered. But, when I talked to Feige about it, he said that they're going to explore the limitations of Captain Marvel, is the way he put it. We were talking about Hawkeye. Hawkeye is going to have a TV show for Disney+. Ben, I think you wrote about this for Monday. So what do we think that's going to be in the shadow of this film? Because obviously he has a family, so family man Hawkeye is not that exciting. And originally we had heard that he was going to be training Kate Bishop, but his daughter and the person we see him training in this movie is not Kate Bishop, it's his daughter, and he calls her Hawkeye. So what is the TV show?
Yeah, the TV show, according to an early report, was supposed to be Clint Barton passing the Hawkeye mantle to Kate Bishop, who's a fan favorite character from the comics. And but I don't know. I feel like with Natasha being, giving up her life, and that sort of hanging over Clint, and him, clearly being affected by the loss of one of his best friends in the world, that could maybe be the inciting incident for him to sort of put down the bow and arrow for good. And that would maybe explain why he's deciding to pass the mantle on to somebody else. Whether or not that's actually Kate Bishop, or whether that just ends up being his daughter Lila, because, like you said, he refers to her specifically as Hawkeye, remains to be seen. But, Marvel has a history of doing this, Marvel Studios, I should say, where they take elements from the comics and just sort of tweak them a little bit to fit the cinematic, what they're doing cinematically, instead of doing a direct adaptation. So it wouldn't be outside of the realm of possibility for this character Lila, the daughter, to sort of take the Kate Bishop role, and maybe they could save Kate Bishop for later on down the line or something. If they don't want to introduce her right away. It's still up in the air, but those are some possibilities.
I do want to point out that Cassie Lang, Scott Lang's daughter, who's recast for this movie, her and Kate Bishop, along with other characters, form the Young Avengers in the comics, which is a really beloved team of teenage superheroes who have ties to like a lot of other heroes. Like there's characters who are either referencing other heroes with their costumes or directly have blood ties. So I'm wondering if they're casting these characters, like casting a Kate Bishop and casting an older Cassie Lang, so they can maybe give us a Young Avengers movie.
That would be interesting. Okay, let's talk about War Machine, James Rhodes. He is, at the end of this movie, alive. He doesn't really have, like, a huge arc in this movie. He's kind of a supporting player. Is his story still going?
I think he's probably done avenging. I think Don Cheadle's enjoyed the checks. We've enjoyed watching him. But I think as we enter the next phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I think War Machine is probably over and done with, because his whole original goal in this universe was to be Tony Stark's, bantering board. Tony Stark says something funny to Rhodey, and Rhodey reacts. And that's kind of the foundation of why he's there. But Ben, do you see any room forward for Rhodey?
Not really, except as maybe like the position of the elder statesman, the veteran, who may be able to provide some wise counsel to the younger class, as it were. But so they could keep him around, and maybe he could just hang out with Hulk and whatever the other veterans are still there. But dramatically, he's another one of those characters that I feel like has served the purpose that he originally had.
I do love the interaction he has with Nebula, where they're both people that are kind of cyborgs at this point, right? Like they're altered with technology. And he has that moment with her, like telling her that you need to make the best out of what the cards you've been dealt. And I don't know, I just thought that was a nice moment there. Let's talk about Scarlet Witch, who she's dealt with a lot of deaths so far in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We saw her introduced in Age of Ultron, and she lost her brother, and she ended up falling in love with Vision, who was a man/android that was killed at the end of Infinity War and Thanos' step to get all the stones. And she shows up at the end of this movie, from the portals. She shows up and basically kicks Thanos' ass. Like, I think if you were going to say who did the most damage to Thanos, I would say it was Scarlet Witch.
Yeah, I'd agree, either him or Captain Marvel. But in any case, seeing her enraged and reacting to a death like that was something I kind of wished that we saw from Bruce Banner. One of my quibbles with Bruce Banner is that a guy who loved Natasha so much only has one tiny moment of reflection, and it's actually with Natasha, which is nice. I'm sorry, it's actually with Wanda, which is nice.
Yeah.
But to actually have the catharsis of an Avenger avenge a loved one was something that the movie really needed in that climax after so much death.
So this is another character, Vision. We don't think he is alive, right? Like, we think he was killed in Infinity War. We were told by the screenwriters back then that every character that died in Infinity War died, and we don't think that includes the Dusted. And so far, that seems to be technically true, right?
Yeah.
Gamora died, Vision died. Who else died?
Loki and Heimdall.
Yeah.
Although a new version of Loki may be out there now, but who knows?
Yeah.
So.
We'll talk about that in a second. But Vision and Scarlet Witch have a TV show coming to Disney Plus streaming service called WandaVision. And what is this going to be if Vision is dead? I mean, I guess Vision could still be alive. Like, Shuri was working on him before, he was killed. So maybe she was able to download his complete consciousness somehow?
That's my guess. They've actually kind of simplified Wanda's powers for the movies. I think they may actually expand them for the TV show. Her powers are not just telekinesis. She warps reality. She can change reality at will. And I'm wondering, essentially, in the comics, she used her powers to do like extreme things. If they will, the series will be about her trying to recreate Vision and maybe having the repercussions of recreating a dead loved one and realize that they're not the same person or something's wrong. That would be my guess, because I think bringing Vision back as the same person, like, oops, he's alive now, is a cheap shot and something that they've managed to avoid here at Endgame. So I'm hoping that WandaVision is, something a bit crazier, a bit more far out, and we'll actually explore the concept of of what it means to have powers where we can change reality and trying to fix that.
I know Elizabeth Olsen has given us a little bit of info on what this WandaVision TV series is. Ben, you have an article going up on Monday about all of this. What do we know?
Yeah, she just said that the show is going to have a 1950s style aesthetic, which sort of plays into Jacob's theory about her maybe trying to, either create a new version of Vision, or once Shuri has fixed the Vision that it's like the grayed out husk that we saw at the end of Infinity War, maybe the two of them could just sort of, 1950s aesthetic conjures images of, Leave It to Beaver and the, sort of suburban lifestyle. And it's possible that, and Jacob could probably speak to this a little bit better, but I guess Tom King had a Vision comic book series that's sort of like, this would be maybe like an inversion of that.
Yeah, there's a award-winning run on the Vision. It's 12 issues long. It's brilliant from writer Tom King. And the gist of it is that Vision moves to the suburbs to work as a consultant in Washington, D.C., giving up superheroism. And he creates a robotic android family to give him a domestic life. So I'm genuinely wondering if they'll take this basic premise but reverse it, with Wanda trying to create a peaceful life with her with her love of her life. But you think in the comic things go very wrong for Vision, and I wonder if they'll go very wrong for Wanda.
Okay, let's talk about Falcon. Sam Wilson, who starts off as a friend of Captain America in Captain America Winter Soldier.
Yep.
Yeah, and he's running a support group. I think this might be the same support group that Captain America is running here in this movie, maybe not. And he returns from the snap with the great on your left. And he, at the end of this movie, he is presented by old Captain America with the shield, which I'm kind of curious what your thought is on this, Jacob, because I'm not a person that has read anything Falcon in the comics, but it seems like he earned that shield way too easily. And also, it seems to me that he has no superpowers, and I want a Captain America that has some kind of super abilities.
When I first left the theater, I talked to my wife about this. I'm just imagining old man Steve Rogers sitting there with the shield, and he's thinking, okay, I know that Falcon and Winter Soldier are going to be there. Whatever one approaches me first gets the shield. So he's probably wondering, why didn't you give it to Bucky, his oldest friend, who does have superpowers? But when Falcon became Captain America in the comics a few years ago, the whole gist of it was, he still has the wings, but he represents America. He's a soldier who fought in wars and came home and has dedicated his life to helping other veterans. Meanwhile, Winter Soldier, who's also been Captain America in the comics, is still Bucky, but he's still a brainwashed assassin with a lot to clean up for. So Falcon, as Captain America, will have to work 5 times as hard as Captain America to get the job done. But he represents what Steve always strived to, which is, the best of the United States, the best that a soldier can be. Which Bucky really does not, and if they lean on that and lean on the fact that being Captain America will be hard, then I think it could be a really interesting direction.
And we didn't mention the elevator scene with Captain America, call back to Captain America Winter Soldier, also directed by the Russo brothers. But there is that great line that with Captain America saying "Hail Hydra," which is actually kind of a reference to the comic books.
Yeah, there was a very divisive run a few years ago where Captain America was turned into a Hydra agent through all kinds of cosmic shifting around. But here, I think it's the biggest laugh last night in the theater of everyone expecting that our elevator scene to play out as a fight scene again, and Captain America just walks right out after saying the magic words.
And what Winter Soldier, he really wasn't in much of this movie. Is there much to say here?
No, he's Bucky.
He's Bucky.
He's tormented. He needs to get a haircut.
It did seem to me when Steve Rogers was going to go back in time to return the stones that Bucky knew what was going on. After seeing this movie 3 times, it's clear that he's the only one that gives him a huge hug and says, "I'm going to miss you." And he's going away for 5 seconds. It seems like Bucky gets it, and like he even, nods to Falcon when the old man's over there. Like it seems like he was ahead of this whole story.
That makes me feel better, because I part of me was like really perturbed that Bucky was not invited over to go, have the reunion. But if Steve already told him his entire plan, earlier, and they had a chance, to say goodbyes off screen, then I feel a lot better about Bucky not being present with Steve for that moment.
By the way, Ben, you had this theory in the chat, which I have adopted in my time travel article, about old man Steve Rogers. I just thought we should relay it here.
Yeah, so there's the scene where they go back to, I think it's 1970 or something, at the Camp Lehigh, and they get the vials of Pym particles. And I just, we were trying to figure out how Captain America's, how Old Man Cap couldn't break the timeline, even though it sort of does. And I'm sure you guys will talk about this in a future episode of this podcast. But I don't know. I was just like wildly speculating that maybe he grabbed an extra vial of Pym particles, and maybe I don't even know anymore, Peter. To be honest with you, it's so convoluted. Even my attempt to try to work through it all doesn't even fully make sense to me.
Yeah, but the image that you proposed is that of Steve Rogers, old man Steve Rogers, setting up a chair and watching from afar as this whole epic battle unfolds, because he knows what's going to happen. He's lived through it, and he gets to, enjoy it for once from the outside.
He is the one person who knows exactly when and where this whole thing is going to go down. So unless he told other people about it along the way, maybe he sold tickets and just made a boatload of money.
Yeah. Okay. Bucky and Falcon, they are going to have a TV show called Falcon and Winter Soldier, which I'm guessing could be retitled to Captain America and Winter Soldier.
Yeah, I was wondering about that because obviously Sam Wilson has the shield now, so it's either the early adventures of Sam as Captain America, or maybe it's like he has accepted the shield but hasn't fully accepted the role and all the responsibilities that come with that. Maybe the show is going to be sort of a transition period from him, learning what his version of Captain America can be. Or Kevin Feige has also mentioned that some of the Marvel Disney Plus shows could be prequels. So theoretically, you could, catch up with him and Winter Soldier doing some previous adventures and bantering and all that stuff before the events of Endgame. So I don't really think that's going to be an option, but he did mention the possibility of some of these things being prequels, so it shouldn't be completely discounted.
It does seem to me like Sam Wilson accepts the shield, but he does not accept the role. Like he even says it feels like it belongs to someone else or something like that. I'm wondering if this show is going to be kind of the arc of the show is going to be him coming to acceptance of this role and the shield and everything it means. And by the next time we see him in the movies, it will be after that show.
Right.
And, he will be actual Captain America.
Yeah, and that's the thing about the shows, too. I think Feige has mentioned, some of these, the events of these shows will be able to sort of flesh out character moments and developments and arcs and stuff that won't necessarily be fully required if you just want to watch the Marvel movies. So this is the perfect example of that, right? If they were to flesh out Sam's full acceptance of that role and then just pick up in the next movie, people who don't watch the show will just be like, oh, he was given the shield at the end of Endgame and now he's Captain America, and just, make that leap that way.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to some of the more smaller characters. By smaller characters, I still mean characters that have their own standalone films. But, this movie just has too many people to deal with. Let's talk about Black Panther. He doesn't really have a huge role in this. He leads Wakanda into that epic battle at the end Do we have a name for that battle, by the way? Like, I like calling, the Battle of New York. Like, I like having some kind of point of reference, but we don't really have a name, do we?
I was suggesting the Battle of Upstate New York, because that's where Avengers HQ is, and that's the setting for the whole thing. And as sort of a joke reference to the Battle of New York, I thought that's what I'm calling it until I hear an official source elsewhere.
I like it. Let's go with that. So at the end of this movie, we see Black Panther and his other Wakandan royalty, Shuri and whatever, overlooking the Wakandan skyline. I can't really even tell after seeing this for three times. Like, has Wakanda been as devastated by the snap as the rest of the world? Like, it's very hard to see. Like,
it looks like, I'm assuming it has, but Wakanda has a habit of doing things better than the rest of the world, so they've clearly cleaned the city up. But they're also celebrating because everybody's been unstaffed. So
yeah, and we should mention that even though they win in the end of this movie, the snap still happened. So there still is that 5-year gap of in what the after effects it has on this world, which I think is going to come into play in these upcoming films. Speaking of upcoming films, Spider-Man: Far From Home is the next one, and I think some people are a little confused by the reunion between Peter Parker and Ned, which we'll talk about in a minute, but let's talk about Spider-Man's arc thus far in these films. Jacob.
Spider-Man has learned that with great power comes great responsibility, Peter. That's no. But so far, it's for him. It's been his main arc's been in Homecoming, which is where he went from having to earn his suit back, and here I feel like he's been less of having an arc in Infinity War and Endgame and more of being a device to get Tony where he needs to be. And that's fine because Tom Holland is so charming and so sweet. But he exists purely to give something, giving Tony the son he has yet to have. And then when he has a daughter, he remembers Peter Parker. We see him pull that picture off the shelf. And the guidance and love he's given his daughter is something that he finally gives to Peter in that hug on the battlefield. And so I think Spider-Man is very much serving Tony's arc here, but I think that Tony's death is going to give Spidey one hell of an arc in Far From Home.
Yeah, and Spidey's dusting in Infinity War was the only moment in that film that made me tear up. In this film, when it's reversed and he's talking to Tony and telling him he won, it's just so crushing. And I think Far From Home is going to have to deal with this because not only did he provide Tony Stark with the son that he never had, but Tony provided Peter with the father he never had, right? So how is that going to affect him in Far From Home? He, we know he's going on this class trip. We see at the end of this movie him being reunited with Ned. A lot of people are confused with that. How are they both back in school? I think that it's a little bit confusing storytelling-wise. The last time that Peter saw Ned was in that bus in Infinity War when Thanos' ship went over New York City. So they have been separated for some time, but both of them actually were dusted. So they are back in the same class with Zendaya and with Flash, and they were just, I guess, all lucky that they were all dusted.
Yeah, that's the thing is like what are the odds that Peter's best friends and his colleagues in class were all dusted, because it's half the universe and really half of them theoretically should have gone away, but the numbers just sort of fell in favor so all of those characters could be reunited again and on the same page in Far From Home, because for everybody else, for half of Peter's school, the half of the class was still there. So theoretically, they either continued with school and graduated and moved on with their lives, or just all schooling came to a halt for 5 years while everybody was I find it that hard to believe. Yeah. So you have a feeling that half the people that you've been going to school with for your whole life have moved on beyond you. But it just so turns out, as we've seen in the trailers for Far From Home already, that MJ and Flash Thompson and Betty Brant and Ned are all there with Peter. So you have to assume that they were all dusted and then restored, I guess.
We've talked about this on the podcast in the past, how the comic books have these big series that connect the whole universe as a whole, and it kind of puts these standalone stories to stop and then dramatically affects them in ways that kind of suck because you were into what the story was happening, and it just seems like this just like came down and stomped on the series that you're reading. I think this is probably the better way of doing it, where the thing still happened, but they can still go on with their plans of what they set up with these group of characters in this high school. Jacob, what do you think?
Yeah, I think this is the if Endgame and Infinity War was the big crossover event, and the Spider-Man series is its own individual series, and this is the ideal scenario of that, where you can know the little details and there'll still be a line of dialogue about, man, I can't believe half a class is graduated 4 years ago. But yeah, the platonic ideal is that after the crossover event, you can choose to keep in mind the big universe changes, or you can disregard them and enjoy the story at hand. And I think that's going to be the process moving forward. And I really think they're going to pull it off, because I believe that there's people who just watch Spider-Man movies should be able to watch Far From Home and totally follow and totally enjoy it, even though they may not get 1 or 2 lines of dialogue. That
said, Kevin Feige has said that this is the last film in this phase, so it's not Infinity War ends. Infinity War ends the Infinity Saga, but I guess
or Endgame does.
Endgame ends the Infinity Saga, but Spider-Man Far From Home is going to end this phase. So I'm wondering, is this going to be like one giant after credits scene?
I think it's going to be, from what we've seen in the trailer, it looks like its own thing, and it didn't even have any references at all to anything that, any of the events that we've seen. That, people were theorizing that it could even be a prequel, and I don't know if we fully know that, although Amy Pascal, the producer, I think has previously said that it's supposed to pick up a few minutes after the end of Endgame.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to Doctor Strange. Jacob, I know he's one of your favorite characters. Can you talk about his arc thus far?
Yeah, he's my favorite Marvel superhero, and he doesn't get a lot to do here other than be really cool until the very end, where he gives Tony he puts up his finger to say 1, as it referencing the 1 in 14 million chances they have to win this, which Tony reads correctly and sacrifices himself. But even though there isn't a huge arc for Doctor Strange over Infinity War Endgame, it does continue where he was at the end of his solo movie, which was, having learned to accept death, accept pain, and accept his new role. And his new role is to safeguard the universe and safeguard, this realm of existence. And him, coming back and after giving Tony the, prophetic, this is one way to do it, and making that clear to Tony, it really seals the deal on Doctor Strange as being an incredibly powerful figure moving forward, even if it doesn't necessarily advance his character.
I know we did mention Captain Marvel earlier, but I'm wondering, at the end of this movie, we see she's gone through another haircut change.
Love it. Sorry, I love the haircut.
No, I do too. I like it. I'm just wondering, what is Captain Marvel 2 going to be? Do you think that will be set in the 2000s before any of this, or do you think we're going to see the years of her helping out the universe in the snap, or is it just going to fast forward to 2024 after the events of the Infinity Saga?
Ben, what would you rather see?
I think I would rather see her in after the Infinity Saga, just going out and helping the planets that that need help. The idea of another prequel, it works for Wonder Woman, but I don't think you can apply that same thing to Captain Marvel. I don't think narratively we need to see any more of her before she meets up with the Avengers and that team. So I think she would be more interesting as a character, having the full breadth of the experiences that we know that she's had, for us to be able to follow her at that point.
Yeah. Okay. I buy that. Let's move on to Ant-Man, Scott Lang. By the way, I thought it was so funny how many theories that revolved around what Ant-Man's been up to in the quantum realm, how he's going to escape the quantum realm, and, there's tons. You can go to Reddit and see thousands of different theories, and it all came down to be a rat. A rat in the right place at the right time. And honestly, if you ask me, the rat is the true hero of this film.
Yeah, I love this. I love Ant-Man. I love the way Paul Rudd plays him. And part of me is wondering if this is the last we see of him and the Wasp, because their movies were never huge moneymakers. And at the end of this movie, they're with Cassie, together and happy. And there's not a lot of lingering baggage from those movies. So I asked Peter and Ben, is this the last we see Ant-Man and the Wasp?
I feel like they would be really well served to, as supporting characters in somebody else's franchise. I feel like I want to see more of them, but I don't know if we need a full movie of them. That being said, Michael Pena, you can always use more of him in the MCU. So I don't know, maybe bringing those supporting characters into some other movie would maybe feel like too many cameos or too many people crashing the party. But I don't know. What do you guys think?
I want to see a Disney Plus show of that the business that Michael Pena is. What is it called? Ex-Con?
Oh, yeah. Ex-Con.
Yeah. I want to see a sitcom of that. But I do think there's something more to this. Like you mentioned that Cassie becomes the young. Who does she become?
I can't remember her superhero name. I will Google it. But you guys give me some time.
She's in the Young Avengers, is what you said.
Yes.
And I think you could have Ant-Man and the Wasp as supporting characters in a film like that. I think that's viable, and I think also that the quantum realm is not done with this universe. I think we're going to get more of that. So I think there is a need to have them involved some way. Generally, it seems like Marvel is going with trilogies, right? Like it seems like, except for someone like Hulk, it seems like they are building trilogies of films. We're expecting Guardians to end at 3. Iron Man ended at 3. Thor might go on, but it seems like they're building towards trilogy. So I think we will get another Ant-Man film of some kind.
And for the record, Cassie Lang was introduced first as Stature, referring to the fact that she can grow large. And a few years later, a decade later, she became more of a shrink-based character, and she became Stinger. So I don't know if they'll use either of those names, but those were Cassie Lang's superhero names in the comics.
Okay, let's talk about let's go cosmic. Let's talk about Star-Lord, Peter Quill. He in this film doesn't have like a huge role. We actually get to revisit the opening scene from Guardians of the Galaxy, which I think is one of the funniest moments of this film, of seeing him dancing from the third person point of view of not being in the headphones. At stake, he kind of cost us everything in the last movie, and we don't see the weight of that on this character though.
No, not yet. And I do wonder if that will manifest in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, because the movie seems to be setting up the Guardians going on a search to find Gamora, since that's the screen he's looking at the very end. So I would imagine that Volume 3 will deal with the fact that Quill let half the universe die, albeit temporarily. And, the love of his life is out there, but she's not the same woman. And, it's going to be.
But he did it for love, Jacob. He did it for love.
He did it because he's a terrible superhero, and that's why I love him. But yeah, I think that all the Guardians are going to be on this big quest, and maybe his surrogate family of brothers and sisters, he no longer has a father figure in his life, are going to help him overcome the fact that he really screwed things up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Gamora. She died in the last film. She was the sacrifice that Thanos made to get the Soul Stone. In this film, she reappears as 2014 version of Gamora, who ends up going into the future and helping future Nebula escape, and comes in contact with Quill and actually kicks him in the nuts. And a funny scene, we do see after Tony snaps that she's missing, right? So the question is, was she when Tony snaps, is he I want all of Thanos' people to disappear? That would include Gamora, right?
Yeah, but she's no longer Thanos' person.
She's turned on him at that point, I think.
But how does he know that?
He doesn't, but the Stones know.
Stones know everything. So she's out there somewhere, and we're assuming that Star-Lord's going to have to find him. This is going to be the search for Spock, but with Gamora.
Yeah, and I bet they're going to introduce, Adam Warlock teased in Volume 2 as a possible, barrier on that journey.
For sure.
And of course, Thor's going to be there, because Thor's part of Guardian now. That's going to be the best. I'm so excited.
Yeah. I'm wondering if we're not going to get a Thor 4 proper, if we're just going to get the as Guardians of the Galaxy, third film. Okay, let's talk about Nebula. I think that the opening scene in this film, where she's with Tony on this ship, on the 22nd day of a journey, and they're barely surviving. By the way, 22nd, there's been 22 Marvel films. I think there's a connection there. That's my theory. And I love her in these opening scenes where like she is playing this paper football game with Tony, and for the first time in her life she wins something and she doesn't know how to react.
I love Karen Gillan as Nebula. I love her transition from being this tough, hard-ass, evil henchman to being like someone who loves her sister, and even though she never stops being this, hard-ass, she is have transitioned into a genuinely good person. And I think playing that balance of being somebody who is really gruff but has found room in her heart for love is actually a lot harder than it sounds. And I really, really like what they do with her here.
Yeah, and there's also the shot with her and Rocket as right after they get back to Earth and they hold hands. It really got me. Okay, Rocket. So we think Nebula is going to join Guardians of the Galaxy, continuing their mission. I mean, we don't think we see her at the end of the film, so we know that she's probably going to be in Guardians 3. Rocket is also going to be part of that crew. What was Rocket's role in this movie? I mean, he really had a little bit of a backseat here.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess I loved the idea of during the time heist where he is with Thor and they go back to the Dark World setting and he's basically slapping Thor in the face and telling him to get his shit together. I love that dynamic between them, and it seemed like they started that dynamic in Infinity War, right? Like when they first met up and they went off on their side quest to get Stormbreaker going. So I like the idea of Rocket and Thor being friends and how that might how that relationship, their special new friendship, might provide some sort of threat to Peter Quill later. Like the way that Quill and Thor are always in constant competition with each other is just always hilarious to me. And the idea of all of these guys coming together in another Guardians movie is really, really entertaining and like an exciting prospect. But in terms of like what Rocket actually does in this movie, I guess he steals the ether from Natalie Portman off screen, and
By the way, do we think that was actually Natalie Portman, or was from a new scene, or was that just old footage from Thor: The Dark World?
I am almost certain that's a shot from Thor: Dark World they just added a Rocket into.
Yeah. Okay, we have a bunch of people here that we probably can go quickly over. Drax, Mantis, and Groot. Pretty much the same, right? They're part of the Guardians of the Galaxy crew. We don't really learn much about them here. I'm actually kind of sad that we don't really get a significant moment of Rocket and Groot being reunited. We do have that moment during the fight, but it feels like so willy-nilly.
Yeah, but we do get Drax encouraging a knife fight, and that's worth it.
Yeah. Valkyrie we've already talked about. Let's talk about the main people from Wakanda. Like, they don't really have like a significant part in this movie, as we mentioned with Black Panther, but we do see this transmission in when Black Widow is leading the Avengers headquarters. She's having these transmissions from Avengers from around the universe, and she does have this conversation about with Wakanda about there was some shifts underneath the ocean, and they were talking about that it was just an earthquake. I know I've talked to my friend Sean Gerber, who runs Marvel Studio News, and he actually theorizes that this is a subtle setup for Namor.
Namor the Submariner, for people who don't know who that is, it's basically like Marvel's version of Aquaman.
What do you think of that theory, Jacob?
I think it's actually a good one. I really like Namor as a character and think he'd be really fun as a villain in a new phase of Marvel movies. I think the one issue they have is, though, even though I'm pretty sure Namor's earliest incarnations may have come before Aquaman, I think. It's going to invite inevitable Aquaman comparisons because they're both arrogant kings of Atlantis, except that Namor does not like humanity and often wants to destroy them. But I think it's a really, really fun idea, and the idea of Namor waging war on Wakanda in Black Panther 2 could be a really interesting plot. You have king versus king with T'Challa versus Namor, but this is all speculation, albeit fun speculation.
Yeah, so now we get into like the smaller roles, so we can go through this pretty quick. Nick Fury just appears at the end funeral. Is this going to be the end for him in the MCU?
Oh no, he's in Spider-Man.
Yeah. Why am I forgetting that? Yeah, so we will see him in the next movie. So there you go. I was kind of disappointed to not see him, and I mean, Captain Marvel has that moment where she sees the screen and Nick Fury is missing. She realizes that he's been one of the ones that were dusted, and she is nearby on the porch with Nick Fury, but like, I wish we had a scene of like them being reunited after what we assume has been like 30 years or something like that. I mean, maybe she's come back to Earth in that time. I don't know. But I was disappointed to see that we didn't get that. So, Pepper Potts, she, in this movie, does don her own Iron Man suit in the final battle. This is something that she did before in Iron Man 3. After Tony's death, do you think there's a chance that she could be returning and taking on the mantle?
Gwyneth Paltrow has said in press that she thinks she's done with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I get it. She's been doing this for 11 years, and Pepper has never played a major role in a few movies. But I know a lot of fans, and some who've written for our site, articles about this, have wanted Pepper actually in battle in a suit of armor for a long time. So I'm glad that happened. I wish it happened a little earlier, to be honest.
By the way, we had that cool moment where all the female characters, like, are in action together. It's like the ultimate fan service moment, because logistically it doesn't really make much sense why they were all in one area of this battle. But you know what? I clapped every time.
Yeah, my wife grabbed my arm and whispered loudly in my ear, "The ladies!" So
now
it hit the right notes for the right people. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I do want to ask. Tessa Thompson mentioned this a few years ago when Thor Ragnarok, that they approached Kevin Feige at the premiere with a bunch of the actresses from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, basically demanding that they get their own female Avengers style team up. And he said in time, or something's planned, or something like that. Was this it? Is it just this moment, or do you think we're going to get something bigger later on?
I think we're something bigger, right, Ben?
I mean, God, I hope so. Although, like you said, Peter, it didn't really make a lot of logistical sense for them to be there. So I'm not sure how you would how you would lay a foundation for an entire movie for that to make sense. But I mean, I'm sure.
So you just do a Y the Last Man mashup where all the men get dusted somehow. And
you mean half the universe disappears, Peter?
Yes. Yeah. I get exactly, Ben. Okay. Who else do we have? Happy Hogan. We're probably never going to see him again, right?
Right, but his final moment with Morgan, Tony's daughter, is really sweet, and a callback to the first film when he brings a returned home from war Tony a bunch of hamburgers and fast food, with him promising her some cheeseburgers.
Actually, he is in the beginning of one of the trailers for Far From Home, so we're gonna at least see him briefly.
So there we go.
Then,
good. I give Jon Favreau a couple acting paychecks. I think he's underrated as an actor, and I'm happy to see him in these movies. So keep it up.
Probably not worth talking about, but I'll say anyways, at the Avengers Endgame junket, they made custom T-shirts for anybody who attended from the character posters, and I got one of Rocket, and afterwards I regretted not getting the character poster of Happy Hogan of Jon Favreau, because that would be my only chance to have a T-shirt with Jon Favreau on the T-shirt.
Yeah, Peter, you messed up, man. You messed up big time.
Yeah. Okay, Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne we'll probably see in a future Ant-Man kind of thing. We'll see Wong in the next Doctor Strange. Peggy Carter, she's dead, right?
Yeah, she's dead. We'll never see her again, but we know Cap could spend his life with her. It's all we need.
What about Sharon Carter? Sharon Carter, like, that was her granddaughter, so is it a chance that was...
Grandniece, actually.
Grandniece, okay. So, will she, will we see her again?
I hope not. She's a wet blanket of a character, and she only existed so people wouldn't say Cap was gay. So I really, really dislike Sharon Carter.
Yeah, it seemed like the MCU was embarrassed of her while she was in scenes. Like, they were actively embarrassed that she was being included in these movies at the time. So I'm sure that now that now that Cap's story is concluded, there's no reason to bring her back.
Yeah. The Ancient One, I mean, this is just a one and done. It was a fun thing to see her defending the building against the Battle of New York, right?
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea that the Avengers are off doing their own battle, but the other hidden corners of the MCU are still there, which means Ancient One battling aliens on the rooftop. And that cameo from Tilda Swinton, I mean, she's so good in Doctor Strange, she's so good here, and in many ways, it's her choice that lets everybody win. She willingly gives up the Time Stone to Bruce Banner.
Aunt May, who is actually dusted according to the Russo brothers.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, she was dusted, and but if you look at her in this funeral scene, she still looks like she's like 30 years old, because, I mean, that actress always doesn't age. So
Marissa Tomei is a beautiful woman.
Yeah. So apparently, I'm guessing she was dusted for plot reasons, because if you had her not dusted, she would have had to deal with losing Peter for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that would have been like a big change to that character. And this way, it just makes it easier for us. Yeah. So Jane Foster, still not dating Thor, but like, could she come back, or is it the end for her?
Natalie Portman has done so, and Thor is no longer on Earth, so...
Yeah. We saw that Dr. Eric Selvig was dusted. I was actually surprised not to see him in this movie other than that one screen. Is there a chance that he will return?
Ben, are you a Dr. Eric Selvig fan? Because I am.
I mean, he's one of those characters. I don't think... Has he been on screen since the Avengers? Did he appear in anything?
He was in Age of Ultron.
Age of Ultron. Wow, I forgot about that. Yeah, I mean, I honestly, Jacob, I can't say that I'm a Dr. Eric Selvig fan. So
I'll rephrase. I'm a Stellan Skarsgård being silly fan, which means I'm a Dr. Eric Selvig fan. So I'd say bring him back for a couple cameo appearances. Keep Skarsgård alive in the MCU.
I mean, now that you have like Bruce Banner serving the role of like science master, and you've got Peter Parker in the MCU, and you've got Shuri, you've got all these smart figures. I just don't. I don't know if there's any reason to have Selvig anymore. But okay,
there's no need. I'm going to skip a bunch of this, but I do want to talk really quickly about Korg and Meek. They were seen in Thor's house or apartment or whatever on New Asgard, and I just love, by the way, Meek using his knife hands to eat the pizza, and Korg is fighting with someone while playing Fortnite.
Oh man, that's such a great moment, and hearing Taika Waititi's voice again, and just like, of course these guys would be hanging out, and of course they would be so careful to go out of their way to not mention Thanos, and try to just be good friends to Thor and protect him. And speaking of good friends moments, how about when Hulk gives Scott Lang 2 tacos after all of the filling blows out because the jet shows up in Avengers HQ? I just thought that was such a nice moment. I was like, "Aw, friendship tacos, guys!" Yeah,
I love that. I almost wish they Korg and Meek were adopted by the Guardians of the Galaxy, but I guess maybe they're going to be part of Valkyrie's crew.
Yeah, and there's not enough room in that ship for that many people, I don't think.
Yeah. Is there anybody else that we missed that we should talk about? I think we pretty much touched on everybody.
I do want to just point out that they managed to get William Hurt to come stand in the background of one shot, so Thunderbolt Ross could be at Tony's funeral.
Yeah,
I think that was just because he was going to be in that Vanity Fair photo shoot.
Yeah. And not just that, they also had what's his name, Robert Redford, reprising his role as
Alexander Pierce.
Yes, which was nice to see, because he was only in there for a few seconds, a minute of the film. It was nice to see him return and them play on the whole Hydra thing from
the only other the only other person that I think we didn't mention that we know for sure is coming back is Maria Hill, who is going to be back with Nick Fury in Spider-Man Far From Home. But yeah, I think we pretty much covered everybody.
So that is the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, obviously, there's stuff we didn't touch on. There's going to be Eternals introduced. There's going to be Shang-Chi is going to be kind of the Chinese... they're looking at it as almost like a Chinese Black Panther kind of hit is what they're aiming for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's that character has a very interesting background, so I'm very curious to see what they do with that.
So I guess the last question here, I know we've gone way longer than we were planning to, but the last question is, now that we're done with the Infinity Saga, what is next? Like, Jacob, you have read a lot of the comic books. Like, what do you think they could be heading towards next? Like, are we going to see like Secret Invasion?
Secret Invasion was my go-to immediate response to this, because now we know the Skrulls. We know the Skrulls are in Captain Marvel. They were, good guys. It would be very interesting to have, like, in 30 years since Captain Marvel, the Skrulls have, turned around, or at least a group of them have started infiltrating Earth, or have started declaring war, and start replacing Earth's heroes. I think that if they're going to bring back the Skrulls, and now the groundwork's there, reversing that, having Captain Marvel have to come to the grips with the fact that her old allies, maybe have shifted, could be a very interesting way to take this.
Here's a quick question. Do you know if Skrulls can take on the form of dead people?
I think they can.
Because that could be a way for, Robert Downey Jr. to come back in some shocking surprise appearance for, out of nowhere, that they keep out of all the marketing in one of these movies, 5 years from now. Maybe he's just, he's not in anything for a long time, and then all of a sudden he just shows up on screen and everybody gasps and then realizes that he's a Skrull.
But I feel like the amount of time for us to realize that would be so short, because everybody would be like, no, something's up here.
Yeah. I don't know. Just an option.
Another rumor I've heard going around is Dark Avengers. Do you know anything about that, Jacob?
I know the basics, which is in the comics. I mean, there have been various versions of this, but it's essentially a Suicide Squad with Avengers. I know that very similar teams have been formed by heroes trying to, reform villains. Other times, I know, Norman Osborn, Spider-Man villain, at one point became the head of S.H.I.E.L.D. and used it for his own nefarious means, building his own team of Dark Avengers who are all, villains in new armor. So I could an Avengers versus Avengers series where there's a team of heroes versus villains posing as heroes could be fun.
Yeah, I think that could be in the plans. Do we have any other ideas at all? We don't.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, one person we didn't mention here is Thanos. Is Thanos dead? I mean, he's been killed twice now.
Yeah, he's gone. To bring Thanos back would be a bad decision.
The other, or actually, we didn't mention the villains. So really quick, Thanos, bringing him back would be a bad decision, as you say. But on the other hand, I do want to say that I feel like that character was, if I have any criticisms of this movie, they kind of turned that character from someone who had a point of view and had some kind of emotional motives into someone who just wanted to destroy the universe. And it became kind of plain old comic book villain.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I can get behind. I don't think Thanos is the most complicated villain, but I do like how he seems to have come to a clear, logical solution in his own mind in Infinity War. And here, it definitely does resort to, I'm just going to kill everyone.
Yeah, I don't even know what his plan was at that point, but I don't know. Loki is the last person I wanted to talk about because we didn't get to him. We mentioned him in passing. In this movie, the 2012 version of him gets possession of the Tesseract, and he uses it to jump somewhere. The Tesseract can jump to other places, not times. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's how it's been established in the past, but I wouldn't put it past Loki to find a way to make it a time travel device, which would lead to a Loki Disney Plus TV series.
Yeah. We know the Disney Plus TV series is coming up. It's a limited series, and we've heard the potential that he's jumping around to different times, famous events. I'm guessing Forrest Gump style in some way.
Yeah. Quantum leaping his way through the MCU.
Yeah. So don't expect to see the end of him just yet, but do you think we'll ever see him again in the movies?
In the movies, no.
Yeah. I think we're going to get with these Disney Plus series, I think we're going to get these cool side stories. We're going to see people grow in between these movies. What I mentioned with Falcon and Winter Soldier. We're going to see him finding acceptance into the Shield. But it's going to be something that if you don't see that TV series, you could go from Endgame to whatever the next movie is with Falcon, and it would just be time has progressed and he's things are going to be mentioned that happened in that show, but it's not it's essential for you to see it Because I don't think like anybody, like most people don't have enough time to see all of this. I mean, I will, but so I'm guessing Loki's going to be one of those like branches off that will never come back to the main MCU timeline. So it's not going to be complicated to connect the dots.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, any final thoughts?
This movie rules.
Yes.
It's way better than it has any right to be.
Yeah. I've seen it 3 times now. I probably will see it again. So I hope you all enjoyed our analysis of the future of the MCU, going by character. You can find more of all of our work at slashfilm.com. You can find this podcast, Slash Film Daily, published every weekday on iTunes, Google, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps, or you can go to daily.slashfilm.com to find it there.
Peter, can I plug one more thing, actually?
Oh, yes.
I recorded a spoiler-filled discussion, a video review with David Chen from the Slash Filmcast, and that's published on slashfilm.com right now. Maybe we can drop it in the show notes, just in case, because I'm going to be leaving the country, and in case I'm not able to podcast with you guys over the next few days. I just wanted people to be able to check that out if you're interested in more Endgame discussion.
Yes. Okay, send us your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to us at peter@slashfilm.com. And please leave your name and general geographic location in case we mention the email on the air. And please rate and review this podcast on iTunes. Tell your friends. Spread the word. And we'll see you on Monday.